I'm Emilie Lunt, and I believe with my whole heart and soul that our homes are places where we can seek and love the truth, celebrate beauty, and learn good things every single day. That's why I'm educating my kids at home, and I know you can do it too. Welcome to Heart and Soul Homeschool. Well, I'm so happy that I have Christina Carpenter. She is the founder and director of the Bloom and Blossom Conference and a motherhood and homeschool coach. Christina, welcome to Heart and Soul Homeschool.
All right. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited for this.
This is so exciting. We've been chatting, getting ready to hit record here, and they keep having to come in and say, like, okay, we can start. So I think this is going to be a really fun conversation. Before we get started, you want to just tell us a little bit about your family?
Sure. Yeah. So I have 4 kids. My oldest is 17. Then I have a 13-year-old son, 12-year-old son, and a 10-year-old daughter.
Okay, so you've got kind of that middle upper age. And
yes, which is so weird for me because at one point I had 3 in diapers.
Oh, wow.
And
yes.
so now I'm like, everybody's like practically teenagers. So
yes.
It's such a weird transition, but I'm here for it.
Yeah, the seasons of motherhood, right? We were just saying I have an 8 and a 5-year-old, and it all just goes so fast. They tell you that, and you're kind of like, oh, sure.
Right.
But it really does in those seasons. I've even noticed just in the last few months, kind of those transitions that I don't have a baby anymore.
Yeah.
You know, we can do different things and it's exciting. Every stage is exciting and great, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. So my oldest, she just started her senior year the same week that my youngest turned 10. And so I was kind of an emotional
milestones
wreck
everywhere.
I was like,
yes.
What is happening? Yes. It's
yes.
just very transitional time.
Yes. Yeah. And that those are kind of the times that they're maybe a little bit trying at times, but I think they really kind of show who we are, right? As moms and our convictions and those kind of things. So in some ways they're kind of, like you just said, I'm here for it.
Yes.
It's kind of exciting in some ways because it makes us really put what we've talked about into action as we go through those transition times.
Absolutely. Specifically with my oldest daughter, we've home educated from the very beginning. So since she was, little, 4 or 5 years old, and I'm seeing a lot of that fruit that I sowed into her. And so that feels really rewarding.
Yes, I can imagine.
But
I hope that happens for me.
Yeah, it will. Actually, I was just talking to a friend about this last night. Children are like different types of crops. And so in some kids, you will see that fruit sooner than others, and some kids are like potatoes where it takes a little bit longer.
It's all underground.
Yeah, it'll come up, it'll come to the surface. But my oldest daughter, she is like a flower. She just like sprung right up. And so in her senior year, we are definitely seeing that fruit, and we're getting ready to launch her next year off to college.
Yeah, that's so fun. So let's kind of back up a little bit.
Sure.
How did you become a homeschool mom? You said you'd done it from the very beginning.
Right.
What's your story?
Okay, so I'm originally from Washington State.
Okay.
And I actually come from kind of a turbulent background. I moved around a lot. And I actually had never even heard of home education. It wasn't until I moved here and I had my oldest daughter, and at the time I was a single mom, and I met my best friend Kelly, and her daughter is a little bit older than my daughter. So my daughter at this point, just for context, was about 10 months old, and her daughter Boston was about 2.5. And we are still really good friends, by the way. We just actually went up to Minnesota to the Mall of America and had a girls shopping trip. So fun. But anyways, back to that. So she basically was telling me that she planned to home educate Boston, and I was like, you can do that? Like I didn't even know that existed. Yeah. I really didn't. And like the Lord had always put it on my heart that I wanted to be a mom and I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And so I saw home education just as another extension of that. And I decided right then and there as a single mom when my daughter was 10 months old that at this point nobody was going to do a better job than me because nobody was going to be more invested than me. And so that's
what an interesting story, because I think right now, just because of what's going on in the world around us, we live in a time where people's eyes are sort of being open to what's been going on in public education. And so a lot of people's stories right now are, pulling kids from public education or from another educational setting to homeschool. But more and more, I don't hear it a lot when their kids are 10 months old.
Right.
But more and more, I think as people see the beauty of home education, we're going to be hearing more and more stories like yours and your friends, just, from the beginning before I ever get started, like this is what we're going to do, which I think is so neat and encouraging. It's all good, isn't it? However you get there. But that's a really unique story, just the conviction.
I knew that I wanted to reclaim my family culture. And I knew I wanted to reclaim that legacy that I wanted, that I never had in my own family. And I wanted to start that. And so even at that point, being a single mom, I was like, nobody is going to care more about her than me.
Yeah.
And so, and obviously things have evolved, and like my feelings on things have evolved. But when I met my husband, he's always been really supportive. And so it's been a fun journey.
Yeah. And what an encouragement. I'm sure that is, none of us have perfect stories, right? But we can change our family's story. And again, just the conviction. I think that's so neat. I didn't know that about you, so I'm excited to hear that. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So do you have a specific philosophy that you adhere to in your homeschooling, or are you eclectic? What are you?
Yeah, so that's one of my most favorite questions.
Okay.
So a lot of times when I'm doing like speaking sessions or coaching, this comes up. And so I would actually liken my philosophy to kind of like a Starbucks order, right?
Yes.
It's like a coffee order. So I'm just a mix of a lot of different things, but I would basically say that I'm primarily classical with a splash of Charlotte Mason and like a big dollop of whipped cream of that unschooling on the top.
Yeah.
I need to break that down a little bit so you can kind of see where I'm going with this.
Yeah, do it, because I love that analogy.
Yeah. So just because I'm using these terms, but I'm not using them synonymously with approach, and method is not synonymous with actual curriculum and materials. So I need to say that first. So
and that's important.
It is important to know.
Because sometimes I think we can get kind of so caught up in the mechanics of what we're trying to do that we try to adhere to something so closely that it's almost paralyzing.
Exactly.
So I'm loving what you're saying.
Right. So like the methodology is different than the actual curriculum. So when I'm talking that my main Starbucks cup, coffee cup, whatever you want to say, is that classical model, it's more of understanding the maturation of the brain and how our brains actually work and how they develop and how they grow and mature, and how I teach to that developmental stage versus using classical materials. Now, do I use some classical materials? Yeah, I do. But for the most part, when I'm talking about that philosophy, what I mean is more of that methodology of the maturation of the brain, the trivium, where they're at.
Yes.
And then the Charlotte Mason part, which I said is that splash. I actually didn't even really know that Charlotte Mason existed when I started doing this. It's just one of those things that I think it just like intrinsically happened, and I think happens to moms where we just we want these living books, right?
Yes. It's intuitive, right?
It really is.
Speaks to that mama heart that I think we have, and like those God-given instincts for what our kids naturally need. They need to be outside. Their minds need to be like just inspired by what's around them. I think, that's
absolutely. So I would say that is that nature side, that loving of nature. And I have, like I said, I have 2 boys and 2 girls, and all of them have always been drawn to nature-oriented things. My oldest at this point wants to be a marine biologist. She loves those types of things. My younger 3, they go to several different nature-oriented schools and programs. And so I think it's just something that is within them. And so I was just wanting to bring that out and draw that out and create that truth and goodness and beauty. And both of those approaches, the methodology of both of those, emphasize and focus on the personhood of the child,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
And then the last part, that dollop of whipped cream, I don't know about you guys, but I like to put that whipped cream on top. Is that unschooling. And unschooling actually gets a really bad reputation, in my opinion. But I think when we start looking at like reframing what unschooling is not where it's just like, well, Bobby didn't want to do anything today, so we're not doing anything. No.
It's not the feral kids running around the neighborhood like you might picture.
Right.
Yeah.
No. For me and for what I talk about with my clients with unschooling, it's a little bit more being focused on what delights your child and leaving room for that. And for some people, that might be leaving room in their day. And for some people, that might be leaving room in their year, depending on everybody's season, ability, dynamic, and stuff like that. But for me, it's both. Like I try to always see what is delighting my children and try to press into that. So for example, this is how this would look. So we do Christmas school, and I have a general idea of what I want to do. But I have like teen boys, and sometimes they don't want to do Little Women things, you know?
Understandable, I guess.
Right. Team Amy. But anyways, so yesterday they were wanting to watch these YouTube clips. There's just 15 minutes. It's like this doctor person, and I think Dr. Mike is his name, and he kind of breaks down movies and says like what's happening to in these specific movies. And he had like a Christmas edition, right? And so he went through different Christmas movies, like the Santa Claus and like an Elf, like when
classics,
he's when he's eating the cotton balls and like why you couldn't really do that and stuff like that. Well,
that sounds fun.
When he got to the Grinch, he was talking about like how his heart should not have grown 3 sizes and why that's a problem.
Yes.
And so afterwards, we discussed the heart, and then we drew the anatomy of the heart and broke down, you know, the proper function of a heart and like problems that can happen if it starts being enlarged and what that's called.
They will remember that forever.
Right. So that was a moment of like they were interested in this, and we kind of pivoted over here and just applied that academically.
Yeah. You know, so I know you're friends with Rachel Osbury.
Yes, I love her.
She was on that. Yes, she's wonderful. And she was on our show several months ago. And so she was talking about her approach to unschooling and kind of just that guided nature.
Right.
That similar to what you just said, just kind of blew my mind, because you're right. It kind of does get a bad rap. And I think for good reason. Like our kids shouldn't just be doing whatever they want all the time. So I appreciate you laying that out there, because I think that really will be helpful to a lot of moms, because there's so much beauty in leaving that room.
Right.
That's amazing. So you kind of just gave me a little coaching session. I appreciate that. So you are a home education and motherhood coach. What does that mean? Because I'm sort of seeing this crop up more and more. Tell me about it.
Okay, so it actually kind of fell into my lap. And we can talk about that a little bit later when we move on to some of the bloom and blossom oriented things. But basically with a home education and motherhood coach, what that means for me is I work with primarily women. Sometimes I will work with men, and sometimes women want to bring their husbands. And we sit down and I work with people that are just thinking about home educating all the way to have been home educating for like 20 some years. And most of the time what we're doing is we are baselining, and I am helping them develop their vision. And then after that, that's a springboard for everything else. I'm very passionate about vision and mission.
It's so important.
It's so important. And to be honest, I think sometimes some of the books that are out there and some of the resources, when they're focusing and talking about vision and mission, I think sometimes it can be where it's like you write something beautiful, right? Which is wonderful, right? It's heartfelt and everything. But then you put it on the shelf, and then it becomes like that penguin on Toy Story. It's wheezy up there and dusty, right? But they're not walking it out. Right. So part of my coaching is helping people walk out their vision. It's not just the development of the vision, but walking this out and how they can have authentic joy on their home education and motherhood journey.
Yeah, and I guess we should say we don't have time to get into why you call your business this, but your business is called Authentic Joy in the Journey, which I love, because I think we're all looking for that authenticity in life, just that genuine living out of our convictions, which is what you're saying with that vision statement. And I was just thinking as you were talking, so when I first heard of a homeschool vision statement, I was just getting started. My husband and I went to a very large homeschool convention, which those have their place, and they're amazing because you get to kind of see everything. And I think there are points in your journey, or at least in mine, where I needed to see that. I needed to see there were lots of people walking down a similar path. There were lots of resources. But one of the things about that is you're not getting that personal feedback. So you're sitting in a room with 500 other moms who are also being like, what is a homeschool vision statement? And you're all, kind of writing down. And I think I just kind of copied down what the speaker said. And I was like, sounds good, you know, and like you go home and you're right. Like that's in a notebook that I have no idea where it is. Now, since then, I have developed one that we do. We live it out every day, but it can feel so overwhelming. Right. And also you mentioned books. Like those are just information coming at you, but I can see how the give and take of a living, breathing person who wants to help you develop a real journey for your family is so helpful.
So to springboard off of what you're saying, I think the most important part is having a solid mindset, and then process will follow. And so that is what we're working through in these coaching sessions. And I do actually plan on putting this in a book called Authentic Joy in the Journey. But because, like you said, it is like a breathing conversation, you know, it's been refining to try to put that into a book.
Yeah, I can see that it would be, because I think, if you're like me, so we've been homeschooling, this is our 4th year, and I have refined that statement. Like I just said, I don't think our convictions have changed, but I think we understand more what we're doing. Do you find that as people kind of walk through this process, that clarity is probably really, really comforting?
Yes. So I think that, and that's why I really love catching new home educators, because we can start, like the vision will change and evolve some, but the way that we break these things down, it's to the heart of the matter, and that doesn't change. So the vision is still their conviction. And so I'm really specific on, let's break down and let's have really strong words. And then how can we walk this out? How can we walk these words out? How can we give feet to your vision? And so like, it's hard to kind of describe the whole thing, but it's like,
right. Well, it's a long process,
it's
right?
Yeah.
It's not just that you sit down and you talk for 15 minutes.
Right.
It truly is. One thing that we did as a couple, my husband and I, so after we had the one, that I put in the notebook, and then when we really got started, we wrote another one, and we sent that to our family, which was really, I'm so glad that we did that. That's been one of the sweetest parts, because I felt like it helped us communicate to our family in a really good way, our conviction, because you need that backup, right? Like, you really need people to understand why because it sounds crazy to some people what you're doing, but I think then if you're able to articulate that conviction,
that's really beautiful.
It's really helpful. And so I love that you help people do that.
Right.
Yeah. So what does working with you look like? If you book a session, we don't have to do a whole session, obviously, but I think this is a new enough concept that people might be wondering, if I call Christina, what does that process look like?
Okay, so like I said, because I work with people that are just thinking about home educating all the way to have been doing it for a long time, I try to meet what their needs are.
Yes.
Most of the time, I like to start with that baseline. Like, what is that vision? How can we have really secure, strong, definitive words so that we can walk that out? And so usually we start with just like an hour. I call it like our baseline initial consultation. And then after that, people can decide. Some people are like, okay, I want to come back, and I want to come back in a week. I want to digest this, and I want to come back in a week and refine this even more. Because like I told you, I do mindset and processes, and I found that most people need a solid mindset before we can work on some of the processes.
Yes.
But some people come to me and they're like, listen, I'm in a situation where I need to have a solid process before I can find that piece. And so it's just kind of having that conversation with my client to see where they are and meeting them where they're at.
Just to give them like the mind space to process anything else on top of it. That
so it's
sense.
very individualized per client.
Yeah.
And so, but I never want to be one of those people that's like, you have to have X amount of sessions. I will do a recommendation based off of, their season, their dynamic, their experience, their confidence level.
Yeah.
But like I said, some people are like, okay, this session was great, I'll see you in a year, and some people are like, no, I need to see you next week, it just kind of depends. And then off of the motherhood coaching, I have some clients that don't home educate at all. They do plan to, but their kids might be a little younger, or that's just not available for them right now. And so we just kind of collectively talk through like their vision for their family and just kind of like organize spaces in their brain for rhythms and processes for just like better organizational home things, money things, just things like that, just better processes in general.
Yeah, because motherhood and homeschooling are so meshed together.
They are.
I mean, you can't really separate one from the other.
Right.
And then motherhood in our homes and having all of that running, it's a huge responsibility, isn't it?
Yes. So I also, a lot of times when I'm talking about that, I talk about it like how a lot of us want to, like, I'm wearing the mom hat. Okay, now I'm wearing the home education hat. And like, you're really wearing them at the same time. Yes. It's one journey.
Yeah. And when we realize that.
Right. It's actually
helpful.
freeing.
Yes.
It really is freeing, because you're not like, you're juggling, but your mindset is a little bit more solid, because you're like, okay, I don't have to have one foot on each side of the fence. This is one journey, and I'm going to prepare this way. I always tell my clients, though, at the end of it, if you are ever stuck between being mom or teacher, always be mom.
Okay, say that again, because that's really good.
Okay, if you are ever stuck between being mom and teacher, always be mom. Always nurture their heart, because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. Our eternal objectives are always going to be superior to our educational objectives.
What sweet advice. I mean, that's just something that we could come back to over and over and over, because those are real decisions that in the moment, I can't tell you how many times we've been doing school and you can just tell something's a little off, or that what you're doing isn't quite what that child needs, which is what you were talking about before, like leaning into what your child is needing.
Right.
And I think if we give ourselves permission to be mom first, that's what it's all about. And we're pulling the same way, right? It doesn't take away from the school journey. it accomplishes that also.
It actually elevates because when
Yes.
you're meeting your kids where they're at and you're seeing them as a person and you're seeing their heart, sometimes it's a character issue. Sometimes they're just being a human and they're tired and they don't want to do it. And guess what? I'm a human.
Right.
And sometimes I'm tired. And sometimes I don't want to do it. You know what I mean?
Yes, it's real. And I think I've had a realization just about that in the last year. Just like, you know what? We all get tired and they have feelings too, which I think is so funny that we think they don't.
Right.
But it's like as they transition, I was telling you, like my kids, I don't have a baby anymore. My youngest is 5. And just realizing, no, he has thoughts and things that he was planning to do today. And just those realizations of that rhythm of life make being at home with them all the time such a joy when we can make everything work for everyone. And that makes it sound overwhelming. You can't always make everything work. But that heart behind it, right, is so critical. And I am in a process of learning that.
That's really beautiful. Like when you think about like what you're saying is you're being intentional to see them as people too. And that's huge, especially for people who are wanting to home educate. There are a variety of reasons that people want to home educate. And sometimes it does start with like fear-based, like I don't want this. But as they start peeling back some of those fears and they start seeing the possibilities, they're able to look at their kids from more of this perspective, and it just really lends to a beautiful legacy that they're creating. And also, like, we're raising our best friends, guys. Like, that's what we're doing. And so just
Sally
keeping
Clarkson says that a lot. She was the first person I heard say that when I was just getting started, and I was like, wow. That's amazing, really, when you think about it. And
it
I
really
realized
is
that my parents did that really well. They didn't educate us at home, but our relationship, they modeled that really well for me, just like going from a parent into friendship. But I think when we think of them that way, like then we treat them differently, right?
Absolutely.
From even when they're little.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, my oldest is 17. And so I'm kind of teetering. We've been teetering on that for a while. But honestly, it's been really fun and really beautiful. So if you are in the thick of it, stay the path.
Yes. And I think that's encouraging too, because you hear so many people say, I'll homeschool them and then we'll send them to high school. And I've been hearing a lot of moms recently, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just something I need to hear, like, no, stick with it. Like you were saying, that's when the fruit comes, is when they get older. And when you transition into those friendships, that's when all of that hard work and the time that you put in those little years when it seems really hard pays off.
And obviously everybody has their own dynamic and own things that pop up, and maybe, a different type of educational route is needed once they hit older ages, very much dependent on circumstance. But if it is out of fear or, I don't think I can teach X, Y, and Z. Just,
algebra.
biology. Just keep at it. Also, we are teaching them how to think. And so once we recognize that too and give them those skills, it really does free up everybody. It levels the expectation for everybody.
Yeah, and I think even what you were just saying about leaning into their interest in what they need, I mean, that alone, when I think about my high school years, would have eliminated a ton of battles and just like heartache and frustration if everyone had realized Emily's not going to need chemistry in life, And so like just that freeing, but then all of those
seem
stresses,
fine without chemistry.
I think I'm okay. I don't know. I haven't needed it yet, but there may be a day. But no, isn't that funny when you think about it? All of those external stresses that we put on ourselves, to try to get kids to do homework or whatever it is, that when we release ourselves and lean into their giftings and their little path in life, that probably helps the relationship, right?
It really does. And also back to that classical model that I was talking about before, that's so freeing once they hit high school too, because just real quick on the trivium. So basically the trivium, the classical model, is based off of the maturation of their brain. From about 4 to 10, they're in the grammar stage. They're learning through like memorizing things, song, play.
Just being little sponges is how I think of it. They can take in a lot of information.
And then 10 to 14, they're in dialectic, which is truth-seeking conversation. So they can take what they've learned and memorized and start applying it a little bit more. And then from about 14, 15 to 18, they're in the rhetoric phase. So they can take what they know, they can apply it, and now they can teach and defend what they know, right? And so basically our brains do this at a faster rate. And so, for example, if I were to go to nursing school tomorrow, I would be in the grammar stage. Like you wouldn't want me in that rhetoric stage, until I know all of the
something to apply, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
And so so their brains are doing that. And once they hit that rhetoric phase, those other phases come quicker. So if you have a student that is really pushing back on some of these areas, let's pick on math, because I usually...
Because everybody picks on math.
Everybody does. It's an easy one to pick on. Once they're older and they start understanding like, oh, actually, if I am going to go into this field, I am going to need this. It starts becoming like they gain autonomy,
and that motivation
is there.
Purpose.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And so, and their brains will do it at a quicker level. So don't be like, oh man, they had a problem here, here, here. Like, they can catch up and they can do it. It really is, honestly, like the saying, like leading a horse to water. Like, you can lead them to water. You can put this beautiful feast out in front of them, but you can't make them consume it.
Yeah.
And so it usually, like I said, it's math oriented. So just, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be fine.
Relax on the math.
Yes.
Right? Well, I hate to end this here, but we're going to take a quick break, and you're going to come back next week, and we get to talk about Bloom and Blossom Conference, which I'm excited about. So really quick before we totally wrap this one, if someone's listening and they think I would love to talk to Christina and work with her, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Okay, so there are a few different ways that they can do that. I love connecting with people. So definitely, if you're interested, hit me up. I would love to connect with you. You can find me on Instagram at Authentic Joy in the Journey. And you can also go to my website, www.christinacarpenter.org. And then there's like a little contact on the first page, a contact form. You can go ahead and fill that out.
Perfect. And I'll link back to those in the show notes. So it'll be really easy for people just to click. Well, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Chatting further. So for everyone else, I hope you'll join us next week for the next episode of Heart and Soul Homeschool.
Heart and Soul Homeschool is a podcast presentation of the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the host and guests and not necessarily the views of the Herzog Foundation. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode of Heart and Soul Homeschool.